Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Lucas.
and we are two aspiring filmmakers making unnecessary commentary on famous movies.
Each week, we will randomly select a film to analyze, discuss, and review.
We will select the film at the end of each podcast, so you will have ample time to watch the movie before the next episode.
We are slightly qualified film students.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back
Welcome back to another episode.
of SQFS. This week, we are talking about the 1985 Terry Gilliam film, Brazil. I believe this was his third film, maybe fourth, that he wrote and directed, including Monty Python.
Of course.
Hilarious, man.
Yeah, this was my my first viewing of Brazil.
I think this was
It was
my
definitely an interesting watch.
Yeah, it really is for your first time, when you're just completely going in blind. That's how I'd recommend doing it. Like, you should, before watching it, you shouldn't really, look anything up. Like, you should go in fully blind to get the best experience. How was it?
I enjoyed it. Well, honestly, I'm not the hugest, dystopian fan in general, but I thought that this was a fairly entertaining film. I actually quite enjoyed it, just sitting back, watching it, trying to analyze it, taking my rigorous notes.
Oh, yeah.
It was a fun watch.
Yeah, alright. I'll pull up the plot summary real quick. Sam Lowry, played by Jonathan Pryce, is a harried technocrat in a futuristic society that is needlessly convoluted and inefficient. He dreams of a life where he can fly away from technology and overpowering bureaucracy and spend eternity with the woman of his dreams. But, while trying to rectify the wrongful arrest of one Harry Buttle, played by Brian Miller, Lowry meets the woman he is always chasing in his dreams, Jill Layton, played by Kim Greist. Meanwhile, the bureaucracy has fingered him responsible for a rash of terrorist bombings, and Sam and Jill's lives are put in danger. So it is a dystopian sci-fi flick starring some of the Monty Python boys, as well as Robert De Niro. He is in this too. And, it's really impressive, the world they were able to create, at the time at least. I can't really think
I think that the production and costume designs are, just so good in this film, and it's I think that's one of its strongest attributes is the production design in general, because every location that they're on is just, it's all mostly a set, but it's just crazy how immersive the set and designs are.
Because up until that point, I think one of the only other films that really did it as good, I guess, is 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is from way before this.
And Blade Runner.
Although I do think that Brazil has a leg up on Blade Runner in terms of immersive dystopianness. But I guess Blade Runner is more of a space-themed thing. I really liked, on IMDb, it classifies this as a retro futuristic movie, which I kind of think describes it pretty well, because it's not like they have flying cars or anything. It's just a hyper, information-y society. They don't have crazy technology. They've just kind of made everything government-controlled, almost I don't know.
I think what's interesting about this film is that at the start of it says sometime in the 20th century. So, Gilliam isn't creating this film to say this is a futuristic film. It's based during the time when this film was released. Mm-hmm. It's just this hyper-exaggerated version of the world they were living in at the time.
Yeah. And I also really like that he doesn't specify, when and where it takes place. Yeah.
And it's... he's creating this world, but also why it's not a certain time or location is, I think that it's not meant to be based on somewhere real. It's more meant to just be a version of our world, but not our world. in the same time. It's not meant to be based in reality. I mean, if you look at newer films like Scott Pilgrim versus the World or something like that, where you're still in Earth, but it's not our reality. And you just, as you watch the film, you just have to kind of accept that it isn't reality. It's a different version.
Yeah. What were your standout scenes? Do you have any scene that was like a total highlight for you?
Well, I think my favorite scene in the entire movie was the kind of luncheon scene where he goes to lunch with his mother and
yes,
her friend.
Thank you, dude. Daughter. That's like my favorite scene too. Oh.
And I thought that scene was crafted really well. Not only are the costumes and set design and just it
Bro,
all
she's
fits
got a
together,
shoe on her
but,
head. Oh, it's so funny.
But I think the best part of that scene that really tells you what kind of world we're living in, because this scene is it's fairly towards the beginning of the film. It's in like the first 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Because this film is like almost 2.5 hours. But what it does is like, well, there's a bombing in the middle of the restaurant while they're having lunch. And I mean, it's shocking when it happens, but then everyone kind of just ignores it while there's people like bleeding out and dying on the floor. The band keeps playing, and then they just keep talking over the chaos and music that's happening in the background. And I thought that scene was really, it used chaos and noise and just all of it together in a way that kept you as a viewer feeling very much on the edge of your seat. But at the same time, it was like, you know, it was these people just yelling over top of all the chaos, ignoring it. And it was definitely a really interesting view of society and vanity, and also very much like class structure again, like we were talking about in Parasite, very much about rich and poor. And you see the waiters and how their reactions to it, and also the reactions
just,
to
like,
the
put
other
up a
people who weren't
screen.
affected.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that was my favorite scene of the entire film.
Yeah. I guess for me, my favorite kind of scene, I guess it's more of a sequence, is the ending sequence, which I'll talk about more in the ending portion. And I just also, I think I'll point it out now, because I'm not sure where else I would point it out, is all the scenes where Sam's daydream hero character is like flying through the air. I just love that, man. I think it totally looks, it just looks so good to me, because normally when you see like flying in an 80s or 70s movie, it like looks super obviously green screened.
The visual effects were fantastic in this film, even for a film that came out in 1985. Even watching it now, I thought that most, not all, but most of the visual effects were really stellar. And I think that's mostly to do with the majority of the visual effects in this film were practical. Yes. They weren't relying heavily on computer graphics. They used a lot of miniatures, and like when there was fire, they used actual fire. And that's why you're watching a movie that it looks real, because for the most part it is real. But then there are also moments where you see computer graphics and it's not as good. But the flying through the sky scene, I mean, that stuff was really well done, because like in the sky, you're mostly just watching a miniature flying through like this set they've created for it. And then also when he's just flying in general, they've just created this giant set and they just have him on cords and he's actually flying and flapping his wings. So there isn't actually a lot of CGI involved, except for just removing the cords out of the shots. So it's when a movie heavily relies on practical effects, usually the effects come out looking a lot more realistic.
Yes.
Especially when it was in 85.
I totally agree about the whole practical effects thing. The only time I can really think of it taking you out is when he's fighting the large like samurai thing, and then there's the fire coming out of it. It looks pretty...
Yeah, the fire.
It looks pretty cheesy, but you know, I can forgive it considering it's a daydream.
Even to this day, creating CGI fire is very hard, because fire, for some reason, it's just really hard to replicate in computer graphics. So most of the time, even in films now, they use real fire. But yeah, they chose to use CGI fire for that one shot, which I didn't understand because most of the other scenes in this film they used real fire. So I don't know why
it
in
might
this
be because of how
scene.
precise they had to make it. It's supposed to be like
Maybe.
where he's hitting it, so it like comes out in a little burst. Also,
I
I'm
think
pretty sure
that
there's a real
coulda-
person inside that samurai
That's
costume,
true.
so they can't really.
I mean, they could have just changed it to like
Yeah,
something else. It didn't have to be fire.
That's
I don't
true.
know. I thought that was kind of sloppy, but overall, the visual effects are pretty solid.
All right. Should we hop in to the review?
Yeah, why not? Let's just hop into it. Let's get at it.
Yeah. All right. First category, story and originality. Damn, this is a big one. Brazil is so unique to me. I mean, like even Terry Gilliam has said that he took a lot of inspiration from 1984 story-wise.
Yeah.
And Federico Fellini, like visually. It's still it doesn't really it doesn't feel like 1984 at all. The book. I think it's pretty unique from that, and I have never and probably never will see a film that is like Brazil ever again. It's just kind of like the magnum opus of dystopians to me. It does such a good job of making itself unique from everything else. Just the way that the story is told, through all these chaotic elements happening to this one character at one time. Like there's so much going on in this film. Like he's investigating the wrongful arrest / murder. He's also daydreaming about this woman. His AC unit's broken. There's so many aspects to this story that it stands out to me because most dystopian movies would just have focused on maybe the wrongful arrest and gone into more of an action route, but just the way they set up the whole system of the bureaucracy in this film, how everything has to, he has to get a job at information retrieval so he can find more information on Kim Grease's character, Jill.
Old-fashioned Instagram stalking.
Yeah, literally. Like, the most OG Instagram stalking. The story, pretty much to me, is just the story of a man who ends up going insane due to the mindless, repetitive nature of the world he lives in. And the way it kind of differs from 1984 is, like, the system doesn't crack him, he literally just goes completely insane at the end.
Yeah.
And is just no longer even present in the reality. I think it's super original, and I absolutely love the story. Also, quick spoiler alert, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. So, when I was writing all this stuff, I was like, oh, I should try to be kind of like more unbiased, but I kind of just accepted that, this is 50% my podcast. I can be biased. I'm giving the story and originality a 10 out of 10 because,
wow.
like I said, I have never and probably never will see a film that is like Brazil again. And I absolutely love the story and the seamless integration of all these different storylines, which kind of adds to the pressure being put on Sam throughout the whole film. Yeah, I love it.
Okay. For me, story and originality, I think that the overall story of this film is really strong, but I don't know. For me, I took a couple points off because of originality, just because I felt like this film was derived off of so many other dystopian films I've seen before, and I mean, having read and seen 1984, I felt that it did follow a very similar story structure. Yes, it's told in a different way, but what occurs throughout the film is very similar to the plotline of 1984, whether it be falling in love with this girl, trying to kind of kind of outwit this bureaucracy in order to be with her, and then ending up being captured when he was with her, and then being tortured and all of that stuff. It follows the same sort of story structure. That being said, though, this film does it in a very different way, and the world they've created is completely different because, once again, it's more rooted in reality. It's very immersive, and what it does to the story is that everything is surrounded by it. I mean, if you look at that scene where he's in his office and he's playing tug of war basically with the guy next door in order to get just a piece of his desk because the desk is shared through the walls. I mean, it's all these little aspects that bring the story to life. With that being said, I personally had to take a couple points off because I felt like it wasn't the most original film I've ever seen. I also felt like there were a couple like supporting character storylines that felt the motives and stuff felt kind of unclear at some points. Like if you look at Robert De Niro's character, I thought that his character was hilarious. I thought that he gave a really great performance, but it's also, they didn't really answer the question of why he's doing what he's doing, because basically he
just doesn't like the paperwork, bro. He just doesn't. He rebelled against Central Services because he doesn't like doing all that paperwork. Also, you kind of have to remember that the second and third time we see his character is most likely he's not actually there. It's a hallucination.
That's true.
It's only the first time. And then even then it begs the question, was he even there ever? Or is he just a superhero that Sam kind of made up to, to fix his problems? I mean, to be honest, that's also another reason I love this story is once you get kind of past the second half of this film, it's really difficult to tell. Even no matter how many times you've seen it, people will probably have different answers to what's real and what isn't. Because it's kind of made in this way where that could have happened. Like, there's parts of it that are rooted in reality, most likely, but there's also elements Sam probably made up in his mind.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I do like the ambiguity that this film gives. I think that overall it's a very strong story, but just due to some originality and just little, hiccups in the story, I am giving it a 7 out of 10%.
Damn. I mean, you also have to remember that this film was in production while the film 1984 was in production. And actually, the original...
but 1984 was written in the 60s.
Yeah, obviously. I know. But the original title for Brazil was 1984 and a half. And then it was... Oh, shoot. I forget. But yeah, the original title was actually 1984 and a half. But then they released the film 1984, and Terry Gilliam was like, we can't call it that. Now that there's actually a film. So they called it Brazil.
I think what this film is very satirical to the dystopian genre. And that's very present. And I mean, Terry Gilliam is known for his satires and his bleak, dark comedies, and that's definitely what this film is. I mean, emphasis on dark. This is a very dark film, but it does have definitely aspects of comedy and satire, and I think...
Oh, dude, it's hilarious.
Yeah, but
it's funny.
Unfortunately for me, it loses points just because of originality, because anytime you do a satire, for the most part, if it's based off of something else, it's just... I don't know. That's where it lost the points for me. But overall, I think it's a very strong story.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's different. I don't know. To me, I see that it's, the kind of the same concepts, but to me, they're just so different from each other that I don't really dock many points for originality. He definitely got inspiration, but I think he totally took it in a different direction and it's pretty unique compared to 1984. I don't really feel like it's there's too many similar elements, aside from the obvious. But I think it's hard to avoid those when you're making a dystopian kind of super government controlled future, which at the end of the day might have been because of 1984 that he wanted to do that, but I think he did it in a different way.
Yep, sure.
Yeah. So,
I mean, I think 7% is still pretty high.
Yeah.
And it got all of that because of the story for me. I think the story is very solid.
Mm-hmm. Beginning. Next category. The beginning. Ooh. Also, before we get into the beginning, can I just say I love the opening title sequence, which is like, I guess, before the beginning technically. Flying through the sky with the main theme, and it's somewhere in the 20th century. I love that. So good. Also, now actually kind of getting into the beginning, I love the opening sequence of this film. The advertisement they have on the TV for the ducts, which is like a repeated motif throughout basically every single scene in this film, is ducts. There's ducts everywhere. And then I love the explosion, and then the camera, pans sideways to just keep following the TV, even though there's like fire everywhere. The opening scene where they're having Christmas, and just like the SWAT teams or whatever department it's called is like busting in through the ceiling and the windows, and just like snatches away her husband, and then they're like reading off all the reasonings, and then she's in shock, and then he's like, "Oh, just sign here, please." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And then, "Here's the receipt for your husband, and this is my receipt for your receipt." Like, it's hilarious. It's just such a good opening, and it really establishes kind of the world that this movie takes place in, because you start with this title sequence in the clouds, and then just hard cuts to this bleak black street and the very dim lit building that they're living in. Also including the scene of the guy printing out all the like arrest warrants for Tuttles. I just love that the whole story happened literally because of a fly. So that's also just super creative and funny.
See, Walter White, he wasn't crazy. Flies are dangerous, man.
Yes. One simple typo and boom, the whole 2.5 hour film starts. So yeah, I just love this beginning. I think it's a really great way of opening a film where you're not actually following the main character. You're just doing some world building and kind of setting up the story without showing him. So I'm giving this a 5 out of 5. I absolutely love this beginning. It's hilarious, powerful. I love it.
Yeah. What I like about this opening sequence is it tells the audience so much without really doing too much. Right away, when there's that explosion in the TV store, we're automatically told that we're in a dangerous setting. And also, I like the fact, as you were mentioning, the camera kind of does what we see all of the characters doing throughout the movie when bombs explode. The camera kind of just ignores it and continues watching the television. And I think that's really interesting because, of course, as I was talking about in the restaurant scene, that's what the characters do. They kind of just ignore the bombings and keep going on with whatever it was they were doing. And then, I think ultimately this scene is really well crafted. We're told so much from, him writing the arrest warrants, and then the SWAT team breaking in, taking this man, putting the hood over his head and basically just like taking him by a leash, by a collar. It tells us so much about the government. Also, it gives us an introduction to all of the paperwork that is constantly there's so much paperwork in this movie. Oh my god.
Much.
But it immediately tells us everything we need to know about this movie. Yes, it doesn't introduce us to our main character yet, but it tells us everything we need to know about the society we are entering into. And it's also just a really powerful scene because, yes, it's funny because we know that all of this is just happening because of the bug and the typo, but it's also very dark, and it's actually kind of sad because this family's just trying to celebrate Christmas with his 2 young children, and then their dad just gets, taken. Basically, it looks like he's being taken hostage by the government for a crime he clearly didn't commit. So I think it's a very strong opening scene, and I agree with you. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5%.
Yes, sir. Also, I forgot to mention this because I have it written in a different section, but the way that they use the TV to transition between the three locations is also super creative. I had that done under editing, but I'll mention it now. Like, they're following that one news broadcast in each of the three, in each the street as well as the office and the house. And I also just love the irony of him asking him, like, oh, are you guys cracking down on the bombings? Or like, what are your thoughts on the terrorist bombings? And all this stuff. And like the Minister of Defense or whatever is just totally clueless and doesn't really care. Like you said, it just tells you a lot about the government right off the bat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Great.
The other thing I like about this movie is that it doesn't create the government to be this like big enemy like all the other dystopian films we've seen. Like the government is the enemy, or it's creating this huge villain. They're not. They're just unorganized and kind of like, they're just, and that's why this is rooted in reality, because at the time it was just kind of a political commentary on the government at the time, and kind of just saying, there's something wrong here. I mean, look at all this paperwork, look at all this unorganization, look at all the chaos that is occurring and all this stuff that is happening just because of like, a mishap. And I think that's what's also pushing this film, because it's not about a villain, it's just about kind of how society runs. And I like that. Preach,
king. I love this. Beautiful. Let's transition into the ending. This might take a while.
Okay. I loved the ending.
Oh, yes. I honestly, like, I just wish I could go back and watch it with clean eyes and see it unfold for the first time. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen.
I was expecting the ending to be dark, because as you're saying in our Inglourious Bastards podcast at the end, you're saying that they rewrote the ending, the production company originally, and put out Brazil, what was it called? Brazil Love Conquers All?
Yeah, the Love Conquers All cut is what they released. So, they were going to release in America, because they released this film almost a year after they released it in Britain for America. Yeah, Warner Bros. Did not like the ending.
So I was expecting it to be dark, but I mean, not that dark. Oh my god, it's so this is a depressing ending.
Yeah.
And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And maybe that says something about myself, but I love endings where it's, the movie just ends because the movie's over. And I like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't go on. It's just like, this is it. This is the character we've been following. Time's up.
He's crazy.
Movie's over.
He's done.
I think it's a very poetic, and it's a very, very well done ending. And also the final sequence is just beautiful. And I think that the final 15 minutes of this film is technically speaking, the strongest part of this film. I mean, I don't know what happened, but in this last sequence, and maybe it's because Gillian was filming it in a way that it was meant to be a little bit trippy, a little bit, it's all in his mind at the end of the day. And maybe that's why the cinematography just is so good in this final sequence.
It's really creative.
And I wish that it could have been like this the entire movie. I get that they're trying to change the feel, but if the entire movie had been filmed like this, I would have been okay with that too, because, I mean, the camera's constantly moving. All the colors are so bright, like that shot of him leaning up against the vibrant red LED lights and blasting on his face. There's so many really cool shots that they did in this final sequence. And then of course the ending is just solid. I don't really know what else to say about this last scene. I think it's beautiful. And also I was thinking about how they I mean, I don't know exactly how much they edited into the Love Conquers All cut, but right. I mean, did they keep it?
Yeah, so what they did with the Love Conquers All cut is they live happily ever after and drive into the countryside, and that's the ending.
Yeah, I read it ended with, instead of cutting back to him being in the chair, it just ended with them being in that grassland area.
They actually change they completely reordered the way the scenes are. So in the opening, the bomb doesn't explode with the TVs. It just kind of cuts to him doing his thing.
Yeah.
The Love Conquers All cut is only 90 minutes. So they edited out a lot.
Oh.
And they also use...
What? It's only 90?
It's like 97 minutes,
Wow.
I think. They cut out a lot.
Wow.
They basically cut out all the scenes. They basically cut out the scene with Jack after he's done killing someone, but instead made the scene, because there's a lot of outtakes. They used a bunch of outtakes so that the scene where Sam and Jack meet up is way longer. So that they're kind of like more friends, you know? Yeah, they just... They focus a lot less on the dark aspects, pretty much is what it is, and just kind of focus on him. Yeah, and also anytime it cuts to like his dream sequence, they like added hella effect, so it's really obvious that it's a dream. They like literally added like a creamy like post effect on it so that it's like very obviously a dream. But yeah.
Because I was thinking if they had changed this movie to end as they're driving off into the countryside, I was thinking that's actually not awful if they keep everything the same way, because then it's just even more ambiguous.
No.
Because
people
would watch that.
They like made it
because people could say like, oh, maybe they did live happily ever after, but then there's also clues because of how, you know, trippy that final sequence is. We could also assume that, oh no, maybe not. We don't need that final shot. I mean, I like that final shot because it's really dark. But if you wanted to cut that out, I think it still works. But yeah, it doesn't work if you're cutting out all this other stuff and trying to make
they
it
cut out a lot,
film.
and yeah, it's pretty much like the title says. Love conquers all. He gets the girl, and they live happily ever after.
Anyways, yeah, 5 out of 5.
5 out of 5. Okay.
5 out of 5.
Yeah, I won't add too much because Lucas kind of said it all, but yeah, this ending's unreal. It's so surreal. I love the way that it kind of blends his dreams and reality. So you've got this Robert De Niro character, which in my opinion, when he's there, obviously him getting broken out of the chair is not reality, but you know, a shot of like him in the actual asylum with his boss, that's real, telling him that Jill is dead. But then it like cuts back to him getting broken out, and then he's in the square. Like, so I think just the way they sequenced it all, it's really hard to tell what is a dream and what's reality, because you know, he goes from that square into his fantasy world with the buildings, and you're literally seeing soldiers mixed with his like dream samurai villain. Like, everything just kind of blends together, and then finally you get that harsh like green screened cut to Jack and his boss saying, "I think we lost him," and then he's just humming the theme song in the chair and credits roll. So yeah, 5 out of 5. Absolutely love it.
Fantastic ending.
Yes.
Moving on to screenplay and dialogue out of 8%.
I mean, okay, it's Terry Gilliam. Like, I am a Monty Python sucker. Holy Grail and Life of Brian are like two of the funniest movies of all time, in my opinion. I totally understand that, his writing style is not for everyone. A lot of people probably don't find it very funny, but I think it's hilarious. There are many times where I like have to pause. I'm laughing so hard. For example, the singing telegram scene where he's coming back to his apartment and it's just completely busted up, and then the singing telegram comes in and delivers the message, and then he starts to sing his message back, and then she's like, "Oh, you don't have to sing." Yeah. And then, I'm trying to remember the exact line. He's like, 8:30, it started an hour ago. And then she's like, "That's the backlog, everybody complains." Like, it's so funny. And it's such like a little one-off scene that it fits the world so well, but you can tell it's just written in there to make the audience laugh, and it totally succeeds. Yeah, to me, the screenplay and dialogue is pretty masterful. So I'm giving it an 8 out of 8.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it. It's hilarious.
I think that the dialogue is really solid in this film. There's some, as you're saying, some really funny scenes, and I kind of want to rewatch this film eventually, because I feel like I went into it not realizing it was meant to be a comedy. I mean, it's not meant to be a complete comedy, but I think I went into this film thinking it was just going to be kind of a dramatic dystopian film.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't catch on until later that, oh wait, this is kind of satirical. This is more of a dark comedy. So I think a lot of the jokes weren't landing for me, and I was kind of confused when I was watching it at the start.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I think the dialogue is really solid. I think that overall, the plot progression is done really well. I do feel like the start is a little too slow for my liking, but I feel like that's a bit more editing than it is screenplay. There are definitely a couple things that I felt the screenplay could have done better. Yes, I think some of the characters, the motives aren't quite there. And I also felt like the whole character of Jill was a little bit underdeveloped for me, and I think that is purely because Terry Gilliam has stated that he didn't really like the actress.
Oh yeah, I was
Jill.
totally gonna talk about that in acting. But could you imagine if he actually cast Jamie Lee Curtis for this? Like,
yeah.
Oh, it would have been perfect. Like, it would have been so much better. But no.
Yeah. He didn't really like her, and he didn't really like her performance, which is weird to me because I thought she gave a really strong performance. But with that being said, he has stated he's cut quite a few of her scenes from the film because he didn't feel like they were up to par. And I think that might also be why her character feels underdeveloped and her progression as a character kind of feels jumpy and a little bit all over the place. The biggest one for me is that Jill, she falls for Lowry really quickly, and it's a total 180 because at the start when he's trying to convince her she's the girl of his dreams and all of that, it's very she's very much like is not into this guy. She kicks him out of her truck, like literally kicks him out of her moving truck, like, and then out of nowhere, like, all he does is he's just like clings onto her truck and he's being super needy, and then like in the progress of like 5 minutes she completely changes her mind, and that didn't make sense to me. I was like, wait, no, why does she like this guy? Why does she like this guy in general, but why, like, she should think this dude is crazy?
From my perspective, at least, the scenes where they actually, you know, they make out and stuff, that's totally in his imagination. Is my opinion. I don't think it's meant. That's kind of why I like it, is because the characters flip so fast. To me, that signifies, oh, like, she actually did die, and he is just now, imagining that she loved him. And they get groovy, which is also, why she gets like long hair in that scene. Yeah, I don't know.
But she's wearing a wig. She puts on a wig.
It's up for interpretation, but that's my...
I mean, it is up for interpretation. I did not think about it that way, to be fair. But yeah, I can see how you... Yeah, I see how that works. I didn't think about it that way, to be honest. And I do want to rewatch this film eventually because I feel like I might have a different look on it.
Yeah. But
yeah, I mean, overall, I think the dialogue is really solid, but I did feel like there were a couple hiccups in the overall screenplay, so I'm going to give it a 6 out of 8%.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's move on to soundtrack. Oh, boy. Oh, my God, Lucas. I am in love with this soundtrack. Oh, please tell me you feel the same way. Like, come on.
No, I honestly was not a huge fan of the soundtrack.
Dude.
This is what I'll say. Okay. I love the theme song, Brazil.
Yeah.
I think that is awesome, and I also love the music they used for the dream sequences.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of the film, I felt the screenplay, I felt the dialogue, the soundtrack was kind of boring, honestly. I felt like the dream sequence and the theme song were solid, but the rest of it, I don't know. Wasn't anything great.
Yeah, to me, the reason I love the soundtrack so much is just because it's so impressive. They use the soundtrack so much in this film. The score is present for a lot of these scenes. Like, I'm talking a lot. It is, like, constantly there. They know when to use silence. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. Like, there are a lot of silent scenes, but overall for a 2.5 hour movie to have that much scoring done, oh, it's so impressive to me. And this isn't like a Taxi Driver where they just literally throw the same song in every single like 5 minutes. This is like an actual score that is changing depending on the scene. I love it. Like, to me, it boosts the feelings of the scenes so well, and you can tell that it's tailored to the exact moments. Like for the first time when Sam and Jill kiss, and then it goes really quiet, and then has this huge triumphant, really over the top feel to it, which to me is almost more saying that this isn't real, because it's like the most triumphant sounding thing of all time. As you were saying, theme song is great. I mean, it's the reason the film's called Brazil, and it's really good. I don't know. Like, I don't think it's boring at all. I think that the score is really, really well done. Especially,
I mean, for me, for a score to be like it's like it has to be a score that I would go back and listen to without the movie for it to be like exceptional.
Guess what I did last night after I finished watching it?
Did you listen
I literally
to the score?
listened to the score while I was writing my notes.
Well, bro, I mean, music is very much
it's very subjective.
Anyone can like different things. Yeah.
But I guess for me the absolute highlights of the score are when he's having his hero fantasies. Oh, it's so good. It's like, I agree. Just thinking about it, it's just I love it. Like, I guess I can see how you think it's boring, but for the way I see it, how I love the score, and it's present for so much of it, I have to give it a 7 out of 7, just because it's not like this is a super good score that they only use a few times. This is like a super good score that is present for almost the entire film. And dude, I love it, man. It's
okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna stop raving now, but it's amazing.
I agree that the hero sequences, the soundtrack is absolutely beautiful. I like the theme song. But this is one thing about me that I hate when music is over dramatic, when it overpowers the scene. I was talking about this in Inglourious Bastards, and it does this too much for me, in my opinion. Like, for example, the scene where they're driving in her truck, and he's like kind of hanging onto the truck. She kicks him out of the car. The music just like all of a sudden is like doo doo, and it's like very like punctuated, and I don't know. I don't like that. I feel like when a scene can speak for itself, you don't have to overpower it with the music. And also, I didn't think the music, in my opinion, was all that great. I mean, yes, you're saying that it evolves over the film, but also that's kind of what a soundtrack should do, in my opinion.
I'm not saying that that's a unique character of this score. I guess I'm just saying that I like the way it progresses due to the nature of the film and the way it gets, surreal near the end.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I think that...
I'm not saying that just because the score changes depending on the scene makes it like the greatest thing of all time. But
no. Yeah, Taxi Driver is a rare one where it's just like, dude, clearly...
Scorsese just loves that song.
He's like, this song's so good, let's play it in every scene, no matter what.
Don't get me wrong, it gets good, but come on. Like, that's actually noticeable. Noticeably like, oh, come on. Like, just stop. Yeah.
Highlights for me with the soundtrack, though. I thought that there were moments where it worked. The lunch scene, again, where the music is purely derived from just the performers in the restaurant who are just playing music for the people sitting there, and then they keep playing after the bombing happens. And I thought that was really strong because you're just hearing it faintly in the background over all of the chaos, and because it's like the contrast of people screaming and dying, and then just this like faint nice string quartet that's happening is like it I really liked that. I thought that was a great use of music, and it really made the scene come alive. And then theme song, hero sequences. But for the rest of the film, I didn't think that the music was all that great. I thought that it was a little over dramatic, or it was just kind of bland in my opinion. So overall I'm gonna give it a 5 out of 7%.
Should we take a quick break before we get into this?
Yeah, quick break.
Sure thing.
Yeah, sure.
All right. All right, welcome back. We are now going to hop into the second half of our review.
Yep.
Starting off with production design. Literally, the first thing I wrote in my notes for this is, do I even have to say anything? Just like, if you've seen this movie, it's incredible. The production design is masterful. Looking back on the fact that I gave both Parasite and Inglourious Basterds a 6 out of 6 for production design, like, I mean, it just does not compare to this film. I'm sorry. Like, hindsight, I should not have given them 6 out of 6s, because this is the true 6 out of 6. Like, this is a film where the production design is actually shaping the narrative of the film. This film would not be what it is without the immaculate production design. And for the costumes, I mean, come on. Like, the costumes are solid. Especially his mother's costumes. I mean, I know I don't really have to touch on that because, I mean, they're just so flamboyant, but to me, it's just a highlight. Like, I know it's a highlight to anyone watching it, but I absolutely love it. I think it's hilarious. Like, just the fact that she's wearing certain things is enough to get me laughing. Like, her shoe on the head type thing. Also, like, how her friend is, like, doing the same plastic surgery but with acid, and then she, like, constantly has complications and getting, like, all sorts of new bandages. I also love the soldiers' uniforms in this thing. How you, like, can barely see their eyes, and they're, like, super overly scary. Like, overly dark. It like totally fits the government, and I love it. Like I said, 6 out of 6. I could go on for way too long about the production design, so I'll keep it short. But just, if you watch the movie, you'll probably agree with me.
For me, the production design was what kept me so entertained throughout this entire film, because yes, there are moments where this film, I mean, it's a long movie, but the production design is just so immaculate. I think it's just fantastic. I think that also the costumes are amazing. The mother, of course, all of just the pastel kind of coloring. I loved how all of the people who worked in the ministry were all wearing black suits, and Sam is wearing a more light gray suit. I loved that. And I just think that overall it's just really well done. So just like you, 6 out of 6%.
All right. Location selection. Now, a lot of this was shot on a set, which doesn't really count towards this. However, like, this film was shot in England, I think, as well as in Paris. But they found all sorts of, like, crazy castle-y places. Like, they filmed the restaurant scene in a palace. So that kind of really high-class vibe is because they literally filmed it inside a palace. So I think the location selection is super, super strong. It's very purposeful, and it totally matches the production design. You know, when they go off the set, they're not... it still fits the world that they have. The production design is so great, and when they go from a set to an actual location, I can't really tell the difference. I mean, yes, you can tell the difference, but not in a bad way. Like, it still fits the world, and it's super purposeful. So I'm giving it a 6 out of 6 as well.
Wow.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure so far I've given nothing but perfect scores. Don't worry, it's changing soon.
This is wow.
Like I said, my bias is coming through strong. But to me, there's nothing wrong with the location selection, and I do really love the palaces they were able to find for the birthday party, as well as the restaurant.
Yeah, when I'm looking at location selection, I think it's pretty solid. I think a lot of it also has to do with the production design, because they decorated these locations really well in order to make them look like you're in the same sort of universe. So, I mean, a lot of that has to do with the set design. But location selection was really solid, and I did think that, you know, overall some of the buildings they used, the torture chamber, originally Gillian had planned to just film that in a small, like, claustrophobic kind of room location. Obviously they went a completely different route, because
they went like the biggest possible space.
When he went location scouting, he kind of just found this place, and he was like, yes, this is it, this is what we're doing. And I think I mean, that's amazing, because sometimes directors can be really set in their ways, but I mean, you know, I think that scene would have worked also in a very claustrophobic kind of scenario, but I think that just that location in itself is so beautifully terrifying. And it really works with that long hallway kind of pathway, with Jack walking up in that baby mask. So I think that definitely heightens my points.
The baby mask, yes.
Heightens my points for location selection. That's another thing with costumes, is the dream sequences. The costumes are just amazing.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, location selection, the only reason I'm not giving it full points is there were a couple scenes where they filmed on just kind of like public roads or public alleyways, and they didn't, in my opinion, really fit the world well enough. Like, you know, when they're driving on a road, sometimes you'll look out the window and it's just like they're on a highway. Like, it wasn't that great. Also, there was like a couple alleyways where he's just kind of walking down, and it's clear it's just like a kind of modern rundown alleyway. And I feel like if they had decorated it a bit more, if they had maybe put some like piping outside, or just like some, I don't know, like they could have decorated it a bit more just to make it a bit more immersive. And that's why I'm not going to give it full points. But overall, I think location selection was pretty good. And yeah, also the grass hills, like you were talking about before, at the end of that final dream sequence. So yeah, I'm going to give location selection a 5 out of 6%.
Let's move on to cinematography.
Okay.
Okay, here's my controversial opinion, because I know for a fact that most people do not like the Gilliam super wide angle cinematography. But in this film and in Fear and Loathing, I am a fan. Like, I know, once again, I know this is a controversial opinion, but I just, like, in almost every other film using this technique, I think it comes off almost like childish, in a way. Like, I don't know, I was watching The Grinch, like the Jim Carrey Grinch the other day, and they were totally using that kind of like super wide angle but close filming style, and it was just coming off as like childish. But I think in this film, the way he uses it is really, really cool. And
and he doesn't use it too much. He kind of just like has them once in a while, and I think that works really well, kind of the fishbowl look.
Yeah, he shot this primarily on 14 millimeter, 11 millimeter, and 9.8.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was saying milliliter, but, you know, 14 mil, 11 mil, and 9.8 mil lenses. And the 9.8 mil lens was actually pretty much just like a 9.8 mil lens that is not a fisheye, that didn't fisheye, was pretty much brand new technology at the time that they were making this. So this was one of the first movies ever shot with the 9.8 mil lens that didn't fisheye.
Yeah, and it adds to the hyper-realism. because everything is just
totally.
not quite normal, and I think that's definitely a interesting choice.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I also love certain things in his dream sequences, like when he's fighting the samurai. There's that shot where he's fighting it, and you can tell he's fighting it, but all you can see is the shadows fighting, and then the shadow disappears, and the music cues. So you can't even tell, like, you can't see the samurai during that, but just seeing the shadows enough to, like, make it a nice fight. So yeah, 9 out of 10. Love the cinematography. Innovative, creative. What more can I say?
Yeah, okay. For me, cinematography, well, let's start with the pros. I thought that opening shot to show the ministry, where it's like this long sped up shot that like backs up and kind of shows the entire workflow that we're seeing in this area where Sam is working. I thought that was a really cool shot. I also agree. I think the use of a wide angle lens, especially when shooting more like close-ups and medium close-ups, using that wide angle lens is a really cool way to kind of distort this world that is already very crazy and hyper real, but just to add this like kind of wide angle lens on close-ups so that everyone's faces are slightly distorted, it definitely adds to the overall atmosphere of the film. That final sequence, how it starts with Jack being shot and then the blood splatters onto the camera, I always love when they do that. And yeah, as I was saying before, the final long like 15-minute dream sequence is, I think, the best part of this film camera wise. I think it's filmed really well. The use of neon lighting, as you said, was really solid, and I like how the camera constantly was moving in this sequence. The camera never like was steady. It kind of just, it was constantly moving around, constantly like zooming in on Sam, and I thought that was a really cool way to show that this is kind of a dream sequence, and it also just added to the overall look of the film.
Yeah.
The shot I loved was that sequence where Sam is being read all of his charges, and he's hanging there with his hood on, and it's shot like POV, so you're just seeing through the holes of his the hood they put over his face, and he's seeing them reading all of his charges, and you can see his silhouette, a lot of charges behind them,
and like the lawyers giving him options.
Here's what I did not like about the cinematography. I thought that this might have to do more with direction, but this includes cinematographies. I found that the overall placement of characters in a frame were kind of messy, and it felt like Gillian wasn't taking a lot of time in actually directing where people, or blocking where people should be standing, and therefore all of a sudden someone would just be center frame talking to someone who's like almost out of frame. And this was also just because he did a lot of long shots, long wide shots that, I mean, a lot of films do, but just because it wasn't blocked really well, it ended up a lot of people were standing in awkward places, or it just, it didn't work with the rule of thirds, which you can break the rule of thirds 100%, but I feel like he wasn't doing it on purpose, and it was more just not great blocking on his part. I also thought that I get that he's using wide-angle lenses, but overall there was very, very, very little use of depth of field in this film, and I love a good, shallow depth of field, and unfortunately this film...
I know you love that bokeh.
Didn't have that, and there's just all of these shots... I do, and a lot of shots just, watching it now, it feels like it was kind of just filmed on an iPhone, which of course it wasn't. It's an 85, but that's the look it's giving off to me. And I get that sometimes it works because you're showing off the set design, but then there's also a lot of shots where there isn't much to see in the background, and I feel like in those instances you definitely could have upped the depth of field. There were also some really shaky pans and tilts I caught, and I mean, that's just lazy, because you can always just reshoot it if your pan is a little shaky and stuff. But like that scene they're in that it's not a sky train, but it's like this weird futuristic train that they're in, and they do like a pan around. it was kind of it was a cool shot, but the pan itself was very messy, and I feel like they do that a couple times in this film that I think you could just reshot it, is my philosophy with that.
I guess the scene that I noticed that the most in is when they're in the truck cab. It's pretty shaky.
Yeah.
I guess that kind of works because they're in the truck, but...
Yeah, I don't mind handheld. I think handheld works. I think it's just, if you're going to do a pan or a tilt, I mean, just do it until you do it right. And I feel like, he could have just redone it again and it would have been better. And then also there were some scenes where they just randomly would switch from stable to handheld, just in the middle of a scene. And I wasn't sure why. And it was kind of jarring, and it took me out of the film. I feel like you can switch between stable shots and handheld shots, but not in the middle of a scene. You can't switch, like, one person's dialogue is stable, and then you cut to another person's dialogue, and it's handheld. That doesn't work. You gotta make a choice at the beginning of a scene. Is this going to be handheld? Is this going to be stable? And then the cut between them has to be executed well. And there were a couple times that this film kind of just swapped. But overall, I think that what brings the cinematography up for me is definitely that final sequence. I thought it was shot masterfully, and as you're saying, the lighting is really good in this film. And the use of color. They use color really well. I love this kind of like blue gold grade that they had over the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then it's matched with these very pastel reds and pinks and oranges, but also a very like bland gray and black. And I thought that overall the costume and the overall production and grading really worked and helped make each shot in this film feel like they are meant to be in this world, and that a lot of it has to do with the color, and I guess a lot of that is also editing, but it definitely adds to the cinematography. So overall, I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10%. Also, the other thing for me is all of the establishing shots are just fantastic in this film. Every single establishing shot is beautiful, and a lot of that has to do with production design, but I love how they're all super symmetrical. All of the establishing shots, everything is very centered, and it just shows off either these fantastic miniatures or these just beautiful sets. And I think that definitely also upped the percentage for me with cinematography.
All right, let's jump in to editing. I think the editing is pretty strong in this film. Now, I have known to be a fan of funny hard cuts, and this scene has many. Almost pretty much every single transition to a new scene is just a hard cut, and a lot of the times it's really funny. Also, like, I'm not sure if I guess sound design falls under the editing, but I absolutely love the use of sound effects and Foley that's done in this film. Yes, it is pretty wacky at some points, and it's over the top. However, I think that all these crazy sound effects really add to this world, and it totally makes sense. And a lot of times it's pretty funny. Sometimes it does take away, and I get that. But to me, since I am also a fan of, Monty Python and Fear and Loathing, that the editing styles are pretty similar. There's not many there's no transitions really. It's all hard cuts. A lot of the edits are creative, but at the same time, this is the weakest category for me in the whole film. I just think that if the editing was stronger, this legitimately could be the undeniable my favorite film. However, I do think the editing does kind of fall apart in some scenes, and it's just not that clean, or it's just, enough to get by. I think sometimes they hold on characters and shots for too long. Like, there are a lot of long shots, but sometimes it's just a little too much, as well as the pacing, like you were saying in the first act. I kind of agree. While I think that the first act is really funny, I do think the pacing is a little slow compared to everything else, especially the fact that the second and third acts are really fast-paced and things move really quickly. I think that's messed up a little bit. However, due to the strong practical effects, VFX, and just how many funny cuts there are in this thing, I am giving it a 6 out of 8. But I think it's the weakest aspect of this film, is the editing.
Yeah, I agree. I think the editing was definitely the weakest part of this film. I didn't think it was awful. I think that the editing is still fairly good, but there were definitely some issues I had with it. I get why you enjoyed the Foley work, and I understand that it is stylized. I'm just not a huge fan of that over-the-top sound effects, even music I was saying before. And I get using it if that's the comedy and if that's what it's meant to be, but there were parts like just a water tap turning on and it sounds like a fountain. It's just like very exaggerated to the point that it kind of takes me out of the film. And the Foley, even just the footsteps are exaggerated, and I feel like if you're gonna do that, it's hard for me. I don't want to judge it too much because I get this. He did it on purpose, and that's the style he wanted for this film. But I'm just not a huge fan of that. I find that it takes me out of the film.
Yeah,
and
I get that.
It makes it unrealistic. That being said, the overall sound design, not talking about Foley work, but just the sound in itself was solid. I think this film, it's entertaining, especially for my first watch. I definitely found it entertaining, but the pacing is slow. And it's a 2.5 hour movie, and it definitely did not have to be 2.5 hours. There are a lot of shots that feel like go on for way too long. And I'm fine with that being my first watch because I'm able to enjoy the production design and enjoy just everything that is in this film. But I feel like after my second or third viewing of this film, it could kind of be a little bit boring. But what also saves the editing here is, of course, the color grading with that blue and gold color grade and then matched with the silver and kind of mahogany brown set design. And there's like no continuity errors. That's the other thing that the editing has going for it. There was nothing that really stood out for me continuity wise. And yeah, of course, we talked about the CGI fire. It's not amazing. Yes, it's good for the time, but also I feel like it wasn't colored very well. Like, it's kind of purple.
It's pretty purple.
There's definitely some aspects of it that didn't feel great.
Just compared to, I don't know, Star Wars. Star Wars is super impressive. That's what, a 7-year difference. But, the effects in Star Wars they don't hold up that well.
No,
so I feel
not
kind of comparing it to other sci-fi movies, that's what I was kind of basing it off of.
Yeah.
Because, you do have to remember that this is 35 years old, so it's probably the best they could do at the time.
And then the other thing for me, I think that some scenes could have been a lot more tense if the Foley work hadn't been over-exaggerated. Like that sequence where he's fighting that samurai, and he's everything is so exaggerated that the scene itself...
it is his dream.
It doesn't... It is a dream, but I feel like that scene could have been really intense and kind of terrifying if it was bleak silence and then you just hear footsteps and stuff, but then you kind of get this over-the-top feel of everything. The music, the Foley work, everything's just so over-the-top for me. I don't know. Not my style. But overall, I think that just the ending is solid, but, they could have picked up the pace a little bit. But yeah, I'm pretty close to you. I gave it a 5 out of 8%.
Now let's move on to the acting. I'm a pretty big fan of the acting. It's not perfect, and to be honest, what drags it down for me a lot is Kim Greist playing the love interest. I really love all the Monty Python cast's performances in this thing, and I love Jonathan Pryce's performance. Jonathan Pryce is a phenomenal actor. He's still going, of course. He was in the Two Popes, right?
Yeah, you got nominated for that.
Yeah, you got Oscar nom for that. Yeah, so he's still kicking it. I think his performance is amazing. I think Robert De Niro's performance is amazing. And pretty much every member of the bureaucracy, especially his boss at the beginning in Records, their performances are just hilarious. Yes, they're over the top, but they're hilarious. They play their characters super, super well. And I'm a fan of the British accent, man. Something about it, it just makes stuff funnier. So yeah, literally, just Kim Greist, man. The reason he cast her is because the fact that she was so inexperienced and hadn't been in, I think she was only in like one feature length before this. He wanted the love interest to not have audiences like associating her with a past role. So he cast someone with very little experience and then went on to say like that probably should have been a red flag.
Right.
So her performance was just weak. I just don't like it. The fact that he could have cast Jamie Lee Curtis just pisses me off. Like, Jamie Lee Curtis would have been perfect for this role. And they look almost the exact same. Like, it actually just angers me that he didn't cast her. I think there was something like 24 actresses he was considering for it, and he picked, like, the worst one. Which is, unfortunate. But, yeah. Overall, the acting, I'm giving an 8 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that the acting in this film was okay. I didn't think it was anything exceptional. I didn't think anyone gave, like, a phenomenal performance by any means. I thought that the strongest performance, actually, in the entire film was Katherine Helmond, who plays Sam's mother, Jonathan Pryce's mother, in the film. I thought she gave the strongest performance. I really liked what she did with the character. And then, I think Robert De Niro also gave one of the strongest performances, even though he's only in, like, 3 scenes. His delivery is just really good, and he's, like, quick and snappy, and he has a pace to everything he says, and it really works for his character, and it makes the comedy funnier because I feel like his timing just works. And then, I thought that Jonathan Pryce was good. I didn't think his performance was anything incredible, but I thought that he did what he needed to do for this film. Once again, I'm not huge on over-the-top anything, and this film is very much about the over-the-topness of everything. So I think Jonathan Pryce, he gives an over-the-top performance, but I get that's the point. But that being said, I think there are a lot of times where his reactions are they're just, I don't know. They're a little too much for me. But that being said, that is what he was asked to do, and that's what they wanted him to do, and that it fits in the film. Kim Greist, I actually thought she gave an okay performance. I didn't hate it. The problem with her performance is the fact that everyone else is so over the top and she's more rooted in reality is what makes her performance feel kind of out of place. I don't think that her performance is bad. I think it's just the way she approached the character was not fitting for the rest of the film.
Yeah.
But I did like her character. It's very, like, it had similar vibes to Charlize Theron in Mad Max Fury Road. The characters had a very similar idea, and I liked how her character, the difference in her performance from when she's in the dream sequences and then her actual real life character, I thought was interesting. That being said, I think overall the performances are pretty good, and I think what really raises this is Katherine Helmond's performance. I just really loved. I loved every scene she was in. So I'm going to give performances, acting, 7 out of 10%.
Okay. Entertainment value. This movie is really rewatchable, for me at least. Mostly due to just how crazy the nature of the story is. Like I said, there's so much going on in his life that when I'm done watching it and I rewatch it, I almost always forget certain jokes, and they still catch me off guard as if it was a first watch, just because this thing is packed with subtle jokes. Just little things that, like little remarks, little one-liners they'll say to each other that you won't catch one viewing, and then you'll catch it on your second one, and you won't on your third. So it keeps you on your toes, and it's super funny and it's super dark, but it also has some decent action sequences too that make it more entertaining as well.
Yeah.
For me, it definitely tops the dystopian futuristic genre it falls into. The only movies that I can think of that really rival it are 2001 and Blade Runner, at least in that era. But in general, dystopian movies, this is like peak entertainment for me. Really, the only thing dragging it down is the decently slow nature of the first act. And to be honest, I'm not usually one to hate on slower paced first acts because, especially in this film, like, I don't think it takes away too much. Like, I don't find myself actually being bored during the first act. I think it's more just the contrast with how entertaining the second and the third acts are that make it a bit more boring. But I think it's necessary. Like, I don't think there's too much stuff they could have cut out or made faster in the first act because it sets up his descent into madness really well. So I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 for entertainment value. It's like, I get why you don't think it's as funny. Like, for a Monty Python fan, all these jokes land with me. Like, I think this movie's hilarious, and I totally get that the over-the-top style of comedy it has at some points aren't for everyone, and they probably won't think it's funny, but to me, this movie is hilarious, and also has some great action sequences, and just the ending. If I start watching this movie, I'll probably watch it all the way through just so I can get to the ending. So yeah, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Like I said, the only thing that could have been better is the pacing in the first act, but I do think it's necessary, so to be honest, yeah, it's 9 out of 10.
Yeah, for my first watch, this was a very entertaining film. I don't know how I'll feel when I rewatch it, but definitely first watch, and that is how I'm grading this. It was a super entertaining film. It's a very immersive story. And also, once again, the production design is just so cool that every shot, even if, I don't know, it is a long movie, and even if there were slower moments, I was just looking at everything everywhere and trying to analyze every single aspect of the set and design and the costumes, and I think that's what made it so entertaining for me. I really loved the aspect of how this film plays out, and I thought that the final 20 minutes of this film were some of the most entertaining moments of cinema I have watched in a while. I really loved the ending, and I think that's why I found this movie so entertaining. And as I was saying, I was talking a lot about how films end when we were doing the Parasite podcast, and ending is so important to me, and it's definitely, in my opinion, if a film doesn't have a good ending, I automatically don't like the film as much as I should. And I get that probably isn't the best way to approach films, but for some reason that's just how my brain works. And when this film ended, I automatically loved it so much more than I thought I was going to, because as I was watching it, I was kind of like on the fence, but then because of that final 20 minutes, this film pushed up for me quite a bit.
Yeah.
Overall, I think it is an entertaining film. I think if I rewatch this film thinking about it more as a satirical dark comedy, I'm going to be entertained probably the same amount. But yeah, I do get why people say it's slow. It is a long movie. There is some pacing issues. I didn't have a problem with that as for my first viewing, but yes, I can see myself finding it a little slow after multiple viewings. But yeah, overall, really fun movie, fun watch. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10%.
Nice. Now, for our final category, overall technical achievement. Why don't you take a stab at this first?
Yeah, well, I think people probably are going to assume my overall technical achievement isn't extremely high. I think there are definitely issues that this film falls under, whether it be some lazy cinematography, also just, not incredible editing. I thought that the overall sound was good, but the Foley work wasn't, not my style. I thought that overall, the cinematography, there are definitely pros and cons to it. I think that when we're looking at the overall technical achievement, it is solid. There isn't, problems with anything technical. It's more of opinion-based when it comes to my look at the technical achievement. The only parts that aren't opinion-based for me are just, as I was talking about before, the shaky or kind of messy pans and tilts, and also just the lack of direction in the framing for the cinematography. So, overall, I'm going to give technical achievement a 10 out of 15%.
Okay. I guess I'm looking at this from a bit of a different standpoint, but certainly at the time, this film was incredibly groundbreaking with the use of visual and practical effects, as well as the sets. I know that the sets don't necessarily fall under technical achievement, but I guess more in the way of just being a technical groundbreaking film. This was that, as well as Gilliam's use of the unconventional lenses and the new 9.8mm lens, definitely pushing the boundaries at what was available for him at the time. And obviously some stuff hasn't aged super well, and yes, there are a lot of shots without that shallow depth of field that looks so good now. But to me, looking at this as a mid 1980s film, if you look at what else was coming out, this film stands out to me as being a technical achievement in film history. Just to be able to build and pull off this kind of world in 1985 and have it still be one of the most believable sci-fi worlds in film history for me is really impressive. I give the overall technical achievement a 13 out of 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about practical effects when I did this percentage. I was more just thinking
I think
really
that's a technical aspect of the film.
Yeah.
I'm not giving it full points for practical effects. When I first did my scoring, I did a bit of a revision today. I had the technical achievement at 14 because I was thinking more about production design and practical effects. But then I was like, yeah, well, those aren't necessarily all technical. So I dropped it a bit.
Yeah, I think this is definitely the film that our percentages are going to differ the most. Well,
They're going to differ the most.
But
this is a film that I put on the list mainly because, first of all, because Lucas had never seen it and I kept trying to get him to watch it because I love it so much. Dude, I've been trying to get everyone to watch this film for a long time.
So when I'm looking at reviewing these films, I think I'm definitely harsher than you with all of them.
Yeah.
And looking back
at
Inglourious
of our personalities in real life, guys.
Looking back at Inglourious Bastards, I think I was a little too easy on it. I was in a really good mood when I watched it. So, but
I think I was way too easy on Parasite. Looking back, but Parasite's amazing, so I don't care.
I'm definitely harsh. And I try to look at all of these films like it's my first time watching it, which was easier for Brazil because it was my first time watching it. And I tried to look at each category and just look at that and not really try and incorporate anything else. But I think a lot of these categories kind of got diluted for me because I loved the ending so much. That being said, when I'm looking at total percentage, I just want to state to everyone that if a movie gets a 65% or above, that means it's a very good movie. For my percentages. For Ben's, it might differ a little bit. But I would say 65 and up is like a very high quality film. And I would say anything that goes 75 into the 80s is like an exceptional film. And I don't even know...
Because you also have to remember that this isn't like we're grading this all as one thing. Like, to individually have every category be above 60 or 70%, which is like what you need to get that means that it's pretty strong in almost every aspect, or it's like super strong in some aspects and weak in others.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And, so... And I don't even know if a film's ever going to go into the 90s for me. I mean, I have no clue. But right now, looking at this, so Brazil, total percentage tallied up, is going to get a 76% from me. 76%.
I mean, honestly, that's pretty much what I expected from you. Yes, I really wanted you to watch it, but honestly, I kind of knew that it wasn't going to be necessarily... Not like you were going to hate it, but I just knew that you weren't going to like it as much as I love it. So yeah, I guess before I say my percentage, you have to remember that this is like one of my favorite movies of all time. So the rating I'm about to drop, you might not see a film get higher than this. My final percentage is a 92%.
Wow, I was actually expecting it to be way high. I was thinking like 96, 95.
Originally, when I did this last night, it was a 95, but I kind of just realized that I was being a little too easy on the editing and the overall technical achievement, because I was like, okay, well, the editing's not actually that good. So,
that averages out to an 84. 84%.
84. So that is a weaker average than the last two films, but not by much, mostly because I absolutely love Brazil. And to be honest, I think it holds up compared to Parasite and Inglourious Bastards. Maybe not technically, but at least from an entertainment standpoint.
Yeah,
I think it holds
agree.
Up.
I
wouldn't consider this film below them necessarily.
The three films we've reviewed so far are also all fairly long films, like in the 2.5 hour range.
2 hours.
Yeah.
I think Inglourious Bastards is the longest of the three.
So I'm going to be interested once we start getting into the more shorter, quick-paced films. But overall...
Yeah. I'm also interested to when we get one that we both agree is not that good, because all three of these films I think we can agree are pretty good.
There aren't a lot of bad films on the wheel, though. We've got a couple like...
We're going to start adding some bad ones, maybe, just to spice it up.
Okay, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come back with The Wheel.
All right.
Okay, and we're back. Thank you to everyone who has sent in some requested films. We got some really sweet films requested. So yeah, everyone just keep sending in those requests. We will put them at the top of the list and they'll eventually get put on the wheel. You can DM us at s_q_f_s on Instagram or Twitter, or email us at sqfilmstudents@gmail.com. With that being said,
pull up that quick.
I guess we're just going to spin the wheel.
That QuickTime player.
And we're spinning in 3, 2, 1.
Oh. Hopefully it's a film I've never seen, so I can get that first viewing experience.
Okay. We have landed on a film called The Place Beyond the Pines.
Oh, a film I have never seen before. Nice.
Ooh, we did a switch. Okay, Ben.
How many times have you seen The Place Beyond the Pines?
I've seen it once.
So
I'm actually really excited to watch it again.
Okay.
Because I've seen this movie once, and I saw it like 3 or 4 years ago.
Okay, I will read a quick plot synopsis. A stunt rider turns into a robber in order to live a happy life with his child and lover, and grabs the attention of a police officer. They both get on a collision course that affects their families. Okay, and this week we will be adding a requested film, The Player, onto our wheel. So that's a fan request, so thank you for requesting that. Yeah. Everybody this week, watch The Place Beyond the Pines. Lucas and I will be watching it and taking extensive notes. And then next week on Monday, you will hear an episode on that film.
Okay, well, I guess that ends it here. Thank you for listening to our review/analysis of Brazil. And we will see you next Monday with The Place Beyond the Pines.
All right, take care, everybody. Happy holidays.
Thank you for listening to Slightly Qualified Film Students.
Make sure to tune in next week for a new film discussion and review.
Our theme song is Slightly Sexy by Thompson Springs.
Make sure to subscribe and leave us a like.
Send us feedback and comments as well as your thoughts on the film. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at S_Q_F_S.
If you would like to send us a question or a comment for next week's episode, you can email us at sqfilmstudents@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.